If you're shopping for a new office chair and you prefer to buy locally, then you are going to run into the Staples Hyken and the Staples Dexley, two of the most popular chairs in the world, both priced for under $150. I'm gonna go over both chairs here, compare them, let you know my opinion, whether it's worth it to go up 20 bucks to get that Dexley, or maybe just head in a different direction altogether. Even though both chairs have the same exact functional package, they do look quite a bit different, with the Dexley having a more modern, up-to-date feel. I do think that the two-tone base and the two-tone frame on the Hyken does look a little bit cheap. You'll also notice that the Hyken has much smaller casters, and the hooded design also makes it have that cheap kind of feel to it. And the mesh on the Dexley is going to be a slight upgrade. It is a little bit softer. I do think it's going to have a little bit more durability, as shown by the fraying mesh already on our Hyken. If you need some other recommendations, check out our office chair cheat sheet in the description, where we rank a ton of different new office chairs. When looking at the sizes of both chairs, you are getting a little bit bigger chair when switching to that Dexley, both in the seat and the backrest. Most noticeably for me is going to be the seat depth. I can feel that it's a bit longer, supporting more of my legs than on that Hyken, and the backrest is a little bit wider, helping me to avoid that frame. One thing to note is that the Hyken seat does go a little bit shorter than the Dexley, so if you're more petite, I'd probably lean towards the Hyken. If you're a little bit bigger, then you're going to want to go with the Dexley. When looking at the seats, they are very similar, but there's going to be a couple differences that do make them feel a little bit different. Most noticeably, like we just talked about, is going to be the size of the seat. Because the seat is a little bit deeper on the Dexley, I don't feel the pad on the front quite as much as I do on the Hyken. I'm going to be honest, neither are great. I can feel the pad on both of them, but it's almost to the point of being excruciating on the Hyken. I don't like either design from that standpoint. And one other thing that I do not like is going to be the pronounced frame. And while the seat on the Dexley is bigger, the frame is much more pronounced, almost like they copied the Aeron seat, like a bucket seat design. So really, both chairs are kind of losing me here in the seat design, mainly because neither of them are comfortable for me to sit in for longer than an hour, maybe 2 hours at the most. So if you're really concerned with seat comfort, this is where I might start to look in a slightly different direction towards maybe a padded seat or a higher end model up to something like a $300 chair, maybe $500 chair. The arms are going to be very similar aside from the looks. Both arm packages are only going to feature that height adjustment, and the height adjustment is okay, but I do think that's a little bit high on the low end for both chairs. That's one thing to think about. You're not going to get any width adjustment, angle adjustment, or depth adjustment with either set of arms, no matter which chair that you go with. When we look at the design from an aesthetic standpoint, I do think it's an upgrade on the Dexley, like we commented on earlier. I think the two-tone frame design on the Hyken is pretty outdated, kind of makes it look cheap. I do like the updated design on the Dexley, and I like the arm pads a little bit better on the Dexley as well. Not necessarily softer, but they feel a little bit flatter, a little bit easier to use at my setup. And again, they're just more modern with the modern times. They don't have that rounded edge, kind of old feel that they do on the Hyken. Like the rest of the chair, the backrests are going to be very, very similar aside from the looks of the chair and then a slight difference to the lumbar section. But both of them have that pulled mesh design over a hard frame. And I will say that the frame is pretty pronounced on both chairs. If I shift side to side, do my famous Russian twist, I will feel that frame. It's not very flexible. A little bit more forgiving on that Dexley just because it's bigger and you have more room, but certainly something to think about. When we look at that lumbar support, neither chair has a very good natural curve. And so most of your lumbar support is going to come from that added adjustable system. On the Hyken, it is a little bit pokey and the range is pretty limited, so I'm not a huge fan of it. I do think they did a much better job on the Dexley. You have a much better height adjustable range, and the pad itself is bigger, so it spreads out the surface area, not making it feel as pokey, and it is a little bit more supportive. So I do give the nod here to the Dexley when it comes to back support overall. And now to the moment you've all been waiting for, the headrest comparison. And shocking here, even though the Dexley has a bigger headrest, and I do think that the mesh is a little bit better, I do think the Hyken headrest is more comfortable for two reasons. One, when you use the tilt adjustment on the Dexley, it doesn't really hold its position very well, and so I can't keep it in the same spot that I want it to. Usually it tilts all the way forward and I end up feeling that frame, which leads me to the second problem on the Dexley, the really pronounced frame, almost more so than the seat. It's really folded in. You can feel it on all sides, and the problem that I have is when I tilt it all the way up, I can feel the bottom of the frame on my neck, and when I tilt it all the way down, I can feel the top of the frame on the back of my head. So I cannot find a good place to use that Dexley headrest all the time, whereas the Hyken headrest, while it's not perfect, it is much more consistent, and I do think it's the best thing about the chair. The recline on the chairs are going to be slightly different when we're looking at the Hyken and the Dexley. For starters, they do have a different mechanism. So in order to use the recline on the Dexley, you just use the same handle handle as the seat height, which makes it pretty convenient. A little bit sleeker look underneath that base, whereas the Hyken has that more outdated base, so you do need to use that second handle to lock it in place if you want to use one of the tilt lock positions. But both chairs are going to have the same range and the same amount of tilt lock positions. Two things though. One, when you recline in the Hyken, it is a little bit risky, and I say that because the base tips. You're not going to get this on the Dexley. The base doesn't tip like this on the Dexley. It's a more solid chair, bigger chair. It just feels a little bit more robust as compared to this one. So do I think that either chair is worth the price? I don't love the Hyken, and I would probably stay away from the Hyken for most people unless you go to the store, sit in it, and absolutely love it. I think that there's better options, including the Dexley. I do think it's worth the $20 upcharge to go with the Dexley, but I do think the Dexley does have quite a few problems that are going to be deal breakers for a lot of people. So if you're in that $150 and less price range, I'd probably start my search with the Tacova. On Amazon, it's about the same price. It has a padded seat, a little bit safer pick, but if you can up your budget to like $350, the Habata E3 is a great all-mesh chair for under $350, but ultimately, I'd really like to see you get into something a little bit more expensive, into that $400 to $600 range, where you're going to be able to see entry-level chairs from companies like Hayworth, like the Soji, or even high-end refurbished chairs like an Amiya or like a Leap chair. I appreciate you guys sticking around for the end. Thanks a lot for watching.
If neither chair looks right for you, check out our office chair cheat sheet in the description with our full rankings on almost every chair we've reviewed.